Welcome back. So, as promised, we got some more content for you. And today we are actually going to dive into the world of film and music. Welcome back. As mentioned, I'm RJ Stone.
I'm AJ Motts.
And we've got some great new content for you, like we were talking about the other day. Now, the cool thing about today is we're actually going to dive into the world of film and music. What could I possibly be talking about?
You could be talking about a video series called Inside Metal.
That's what I'm talking about.
And you can find it on Amazon Prime, and if you're old school like RJ, DVD.
Absolutely, man. I love my DVD collection and my CD collection.
Yes. So on the show today, we got writer, producer, director, all-around creative metal dude, Bob Nalbandian. How you doing, Bob?
Great. What's up, gentlemen?
Hey.
Good to see you. Good to see you.
How you guys doing?
We are well. Is there anything that you don't do?
Yeah. There's a lot of things I don't do, but we won't talk about.
Well, I'm specifically referring to the music, the world of metal.
Now, I've kind of, started out, doing the fanzine thing, writing as a teenager, and that kind of got me into writing for other bigger metal fanzines and magazines, and then I started to get into working at record labels in the early 90s. In 91, I worked at Roadrunner, ran their LA office, and Bizarre Straight Records, and that kind of got me into other stuff. And then I finally, got into, filmmaking just, I guess about 2011, I think we started working on the first Inside Metal in 2012. That was the first project. And, been doing the podcast thing beforehand, doing a lot of interviews with artists. So it kind of came natural. So, yeah.
So it's more of just a natural progression of the next bigger thing.
Yeah, I like to diversify and kind of do, different stuff. I always like doing interviews, and I thought filmmaking would be the next step after doing, video podcasts and regular podcasts that I did in the past. I said, my partner from Inside Metal, who I did the video cast with, Carl and I were actually talking about doing a documentary series, and at that same time, Joe Floyd, Warrior, Fighting for the Earth.
Oh, absolutely. One of my favorite records from '85.
One of the greatest producers as well. He had a studio called Silver Cloud with Warren Croyle, and Warren Croyle got into filmmaking. I guess back in the 90s, and he had hit up Joe about doing a documentary series on the LA scene, and then Joe hit me up to direct, and that's how it all kind of started, and it became a Inside Metal series here. We're working on the new episode right now, Bay Area Godfathers.
That's right. So we got part 1 and part 2, which you screened at NAMM just a couple weeks ago, and a lot of times we refer to NAMM in these episodes because it's something that's pretty near and dear to our heart. And if you haven't been to NAMM, you can try to get in. You have to know somebody to get in, and it's not that hard to find somebody who can get you in, but you got to find somebody who will get you in. It's the whole thing. So you guys got the screen. What, part 2 or the whole thing?
Well, no, we actually screened just part 1, and it actually wasn't a part of NAMM. Just to clarify, it was during NAMM, but it was like the day before for the Metal Awards show. So I want to give props to Pat Giswaldo for hooking us up with that. We did I did a previous documentary, which is outside of the Inside Metal series. It was called Band vs. Brand, which I did for Cleopatra. We screened that last year for the Metal Awards show. And this year, he invited me back to screen the new Inside Metal movie. So it, as you mentioned, it is a 2-part movie. Mm-hmm. We only screened part 1. Okay. And that got a little bit cut off. But we won't get into that. Due to time restrictions. But it was just kind of a taste. It's funny because when he hit me up about it, I told my editors, I go, dude, let's get this movie done quick. We got offered to do the Metal Hall of Fame award show, So we had to get a rough edit together. So it was kind of just a taste of the movie. We wanted to, debut, give an exclusive to the Metal Hall of Fame, attendees there. And then the response was great. They loved it.
So doing a little research on it. It's tentative for this spring. That's when it's supposed to be released. Have you locked in a date yet, or are we still?
No, it's funny. I just was emailing back and forth with Warren, and he's trying to set up. They always have to do, just like record releases. Back in the day, I don't know how it is now digitally, but at least digitally with movies, when you get on Amazon Prime and iTunes, and we got on Google Play and Vudu and a lot of the others. You have to go through, getting the quality control with them. They have to go through everything. And so that takes time. So we have, to get at least a 2-3 month leeway. So, we're still shooting on late spring, I'm hoping, since we'll get the final edit done. It should be this week. And then we'll probably release part 2 to 3 months after, which seems to work better. When we put them both out, too close together or within a month apart, it seems to get lost. So we like to promote it as 2 separate titles, so to speak. Part 1 of Bay Area Godfathers, and then part 2.
So let's talk a little bit about Bay Area Godfathers, since that's fresh in our minds here. And looking at the previews and stuff online and the people that you've interviewed, it's funny because obviously a lot of those guys were also down in LA in the 80s, in the early 80s and mid 80s, which surprises me because you and I, I'm sure, were in the same venues a lot of times, just didn't know each other. So a couple of questions. So first and foremost, was it hard to get these people to sit down, or now because you've got the series behind your belt, so you've got 4 or 5 or releases already, are they like now lining up? So what's the story when you're going after these people to talk to them?
Yeah, well, it's interesting. When we did the interviews, when I got first approached by Warren and Joe about directing the series, and it first kind of started out, we didn't know if it was going to be a series. It was just going to be on the LA scene, and then it got so big, and that's where he said, "Well, dude, just do it 2 parts." And then that just covered. We did the first title was the Pioneers of LA, Hard Rock and Metal, which was the late 70s, kind of the Van Halen era, the Starwood and all, the pre-MTV era, and that became so long, and he said, make it into 2 parts. So we decided to make all the movies into 2 parts, just make it consistent, because we had so many interviews, and I had interviewed so many artists doing the podcast. I knew a lot of these bands. I grew up with a lot of these bands. I interviewed them back in the early 80s with my fanzine, The Headbanger, back in the day. So, I had a good rapport with a lot of the artists and labels and so forth. So that wasn't really that difficult. And, once it got rolling, and that's kind of how we got so many interviews, is, they would tell other people, and people would hear about it. Hey, I want to be a part of this. Oh, I can, so, it just kind of kept going. And, it came to the point where Warren's like, dude, end the interviews, man. This is going to be a 6-hour movie. You got stuff. But at that time, I thought, well, when I'm interviewing, all these artists, the LA bands, like Slayer, members of Slayer or Megadeth, or, Gene Hoglan, was in Dark Angel. A lot of these guys went up to San Francisco. So I thought, you know what, maybe we'll do something about San Francisco. So, I ended up talking to them about that. So a lot of the interviews on here were done all around the same time, around 2012, especially of the LA bands. And of course, Lars, when we interviewed him, we interviewed him for the LA titles, but also San Francisco. So a lot of that was done earlier. And then when I moved up here to the Bay Area, I got my camera guy Alex Gray, and I hooked up with Reality Check TV to do not only do the editing, but they have all this great video footage. They grew up in the Bay Area. If you're people in the Bay Area, probably familiar with Reality Check since the early 90s. They were all over cable TV, and they're all over the place. So, we needed some great Bay Area footage. So we teamed up with them as not just editors, as co-producers. Danny Shipman shot a few interviews for me. He knows a lot of the Bay Area artists. John Stranansky, who I've known for years, worked with his magazine Metal Rendezvous back in the 80s, which is a great Bay Area magazine. And he had access to a lot of bands too. So, me being an LA guy pretty much all my life, I knew a lot of these bands, but I didn't have the direct access. So having, John Stranansky and Danny Shipman involved in helping put together some of the interviews, it definitely was helpful. And then, of course, Reality Check TV had all that great footage that we used in the movie. So
Speaking of interviewing celebrities and rock stars, who was one of the craziest interviews for the series?
You know what's funny is, and I don't want to get into too many details, but
you can protect the names. It's okay.
Thinks about the craziest era was, obviously the mid '80s when the LA metal scene exploded, and during the Motley Crue, Poison, Rat, Warrant, all that era. Of course, there was a lot of debauchery and craziness and drunkenness, but hearing the stories from before that era, late '70s, the Starwood, holy fuck! Some of the stories that came out of the artists talking about the Starwood and about Rodney's old club, English disco, and just as the general scene back then, with the the Quaaludes and the cocaine and just the crazy stories that came out of there.
Anything you wanted.
Anything. And again, this was before MTV, before cameras, before TMZ, before all that bullshit. So really anything you didn't have to worry. You didn't have to look behind your shoulder like now. Everyone's got cell phones, so you can't get away with shit. But back then, and not that it was anything planned, it was just a free environment. It was rock and roll. It was just, it was just what was going on in the air, and everyone just enjoyed that lifestyle and that vibe, And I think back then you didn't have the casualties yet. I mean, obviously you had the Hendrix and of course Jim Morrison and all that stuff that was going on. But when it came to coke and Quaaludes and all that, from what I understand, that was just like the norm. Just normal.
Another day at the office, huh?
Yeah, see, that was out here or out there on the West Coast and the East Coast in New York. It's everybody's like in Studio 54 and doing all that stuff, and obviously a different scene.
Sure.
But
it was all in the 80s. That makes sense.
Different scene, same substances.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So is there anybody you couldn't get for these DVDs that you wanted to get on the DVD, or especially for the Bay Area?
Well, there's always, you always kind of, oh man, I wish I could, again, you have to kind of put a limit. There were certain artists, we pretty much got people from each band. For the first movie, the Pioneers, we really wanted to get someone from Van Halen. And we actually met with Michael Anthony, and he was we met him at he had just moved to Newport Beach. That I think that week we had actually went down and we had met with him at the old the Concert Factory. I don't know what the club was called now, but this was a few years back. But he was really into it. We're talking, we're like, great. And then we spoke to his wife, who I guess is kind of his manager, and Sheila, she's like, oh, God, you got bands like Smile and Snow, and, oh, man, we played with all those guys, a la carte, and she was like, really, oh, this is really cool that you're doing this, but, this was soon after the whole Van Halen debacle when he was out, and you're
not the real bass player, yeah.
And they said, we're just holding off on interviews at this time, and we're like, yeah, but this is about the old days. She's like, yeah, but well, let me look at it, and we'll call you and see if we get it. And that never pandered. That never worked out. But panned out, I meant to say. The Runaways was another one. We were actually talking to a couple of the Runaways. Vicky Blue, I believe, was. But she was like in England. We just couldn't coordinate the schedule. So those were two. And then of course, when it came to bands like Slayer and Megadeth. I know Dave Mustaine very well. He was saying, back in those times, I don't remember much. He said maybe David Ellison would be, so, and David is great. I love David Ellison, and, we got Dave Lombardo, and, I hit up Kerry, and Kerry's, again, I think a lot of those guys, they, when it comes to talking about early stuff in the past, they might not be so. So we never really pushed anyone. Oh, we got to get this guy. We got to get this guy. We got our key players from each band, and we wanted to get not necessarily the most popular guy, but the person that could that remembers the most and could talk about is willing to talk about those days. So, and that's important.
It's a lot of bass players.
Yeah, well, exactly.
Well, you know what they say, if you can remember it, you weren't really there.
Exactly.
So we.
If there's any, of course there's bands afterwards. Oh, we should have got this guy, or and then people say, hey, dude, why didn't you interview me for this? And it was kind of like, it just kind of works out the way it works out. But we try to get as many as we can. And all aspects of it. When it's a scene, like the Bay Area, we don't want to just do it on thrash, and LA, we didn't want to just do it on glam. So we want to get all the inclusive of the whole hard rock metal scene.
Well, he and I joke around a lot because when we run into people who we know and who we don't know, we talk about the music because we're keeping this stuff alive as much as we possibly can. And I'm more of the old school guy, the Slayer, Megadeth, Metallica, all that stuff, and AJ's really into a lot of the newer stuff that's coming out right now. So that's how kind of we complement each other. But we hear these stories, and I said, I used to see these bands, because I was a teenager in the 80s in Orange County, and these guys would play the Golden Bear, they'd play Jezebels, they'd play the Marquee, the Radio City. It's like, so I saw these guys in little, 100-seater, 100-person venues. It's like now they're, our heroes and they're all over the place, but they still keep it real because you'll run into them like you've been doing when you're interviewing them. They're just so down to earth and they want to talk. That's the key. They want to talk.
Well, I think they really enjoy talking about those early days. And once like I said, a lot of these guys know me, and a lot of the people that didn't know me, especially when we first started out and doing, the first title Pioneers and this and that, they're kind of like, okay, because a lot of them are like, yeah, so-and-so, they said they were going to do a documentary. We got offered to do so many documentaries. None of them came out. We never heard. So once they saw the trailer on this, they saw it was real, and they, but a lot of them were kind of like, I'll give you 15 minutes or whatever, and then they come over and they come to Joe's studio, and we've got some old school metal videos going on, and Joe's got his studio, and they, oh wow, this is cool, and they end up being there for 2 hours, and they won't shut up. They just keep rambling. Once they know that I'm from that era, and I'm a fan, and I saw you guys this. I remember this show you did. Oh wow, you were at that show, and then they really open up, and it's like I try to make all the interviews just like a conversation between friends, and like I said, we include some of the deleted scenes in the DVDs for old school guys like you or Dan.
That answers that question.
But there are a lot of scenes that we couldn't include that, once they start talking, they really start talking, then you'll get a call a couple days or a week after, when I said about this or about that, or maybe we shouldn't include that. Can you not include that? And of course, I'm not here to, defame anyone or make anybody look bad or whatever. So yeah, no problem. That's our goal.
That's so funny. 2 questions I got right here. It's like, how much archival footage is there, and who didn't make the cut?
Who knows?
So who was the person you had to cut the most out of?
Okay, so that's the polite way to put it, but I'm going to be blunt. So who wouldn't shut up? That's the question.
Oh man. Well, a lot of this. What's funny is
we need names.
That was when all the stories came out. The Van Halen stories in the old days. All these crazy, crazy stories, and so some of them were like when the cameras were still rolling, but once we turned the cameras off and they knew the cameras were off, then they were, oh man, I got to tell you this one story. I didn't want to share it with the other guy. So a la carte, Brian O'Brien told some great stories. Stephen Quadros from Snow. These guys, they played with the Van Halens and Y&T when they were Yesterday and Today, and a lot of these guys, they were there with AC/DC and Detective. The drummer John Hyde tells some great stories about jamming with Zeppelin and some killer Zeppelin stories. That some of the stuff I don't know if. I shared some of them on the DVD. Cool. When John Bonham was sick, he got to sit in. He tells a great story about John Bonham and sitting on his lap, and and they talk about when AC/DC first time out in the States, AC/DC opened for Detective, and they're like, who the fuck are they see him, and they look like little school kids, Angus, and of course Angus was like 17 at the time. And they're like laughing, joking, who the fuck are these the opening bands? What are school kids opening for us? And then they said when they saw him live, their jaws just dropped. They're like,
Yep.
holy fuck. There's no way we could follow this band, And they were just like, they thought they were just like kids, But, I mean, a lot of cool stories like that. So a lot of those guys just told endless stories. Scotty Waller from Smile told some great stories. I would say most of them from those days. And that was what I was more intrigued about because, again, a lot of the other stories you heard about on MTV or the behind the music, a lot of these artists shared about this or they were caught on video or whatever. The pre-MTV story from the Starwood and all that, I mean, no one has covered really a documentary on that era. And so, the stories were just flowing and my ears were just open like, wow, tell me more, so.
Yeah.
What is it that motivates you to go out and continue doing this stuff? Because this takes a lot of time, because again, you look at the trailers and you've got like 60, 70 people in these interviews. That's not a quick, it's like, okay, let's do this over a weekend or we can do it over a few days, So what's your passion that's keeping you, doing this? And what's next? What's going to be the next one?
Well, my passion, I just got nothing better to do. I got, I'm free. I got no wife. I got no kids. I could devote my time into doing this. I don't have a real 9-to-5 job. So, it works. It's a passion. I love doing it. The interviews are the fun part. I mean, it's time consuming, but meeting them and doing the interviews, that to me is not the hard work. It's after you get the interviews into hundreds of hours of footage, you got to go through it. You got to make notes on it, So before I give it to the editor, I have to go through everything, make notes, then we edit it down, then we have to sequence it to make it into a storyline, and that's when it really gets, involved and time consuming and so forth. But it does take time, but it is a passion, and I think it's something that really needs to, we wanted to, when it comes to all the titles we did, and including this Bay Area metal title, we wanted to do a documentary film on that whole scene that really captured that vibe of that 80s scene. And again, we don't want to specifically do one genre of metal, be it thrash or glam or whatever. We kind of cover the whole spectrum and take the viewers back to that time, because a lot of people that, we're talking about a lot of the bands, even in like LA metal scene explodes, bands like Warrior, bands like, Malice, and that, bands that were huge back then, as you remember, they're selling out the country club. They were Racer X, all these bands, Leatherwolf. They were selling just as many as the Poisons and the Warrants, and if not more.
And somebody needs to re-release the Lion record.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, Lion. We got Jerry Best. Well, dude, I was hanging out with Jerry Best at NAMM, and Rock Candy is reissuing it, the Lion record. Dangerous Attraction. So there you go. An exclusive. You'll hear the Lion Dangerous Attraction on.
Awesome! I have it on cassette.
It's another great example. They were a great.
They're phenomenal.
And these bands, a lot of them, they got bum deals with the labels or things didn't pan out, so people forgot about them. And people watch, who is this band? But it's like, no, these were the big bands of that era. So Rough Cut, all those bands that have kind of since been a bit forgotten about. We cover in Max Havoc. A lot of these bands that I remember that band from way. Wow, that's cool. So it kind of we didn't want to just do the popular bands of we could have just did Guns N' Roses and Motley and all those bands, but we wanted to do the scene, what was popular at that time in that era.
Oh, and they all had their devout followings. What's that little guitarist out of Rough Cut? Didn't he go on to do something?
Oh, Amir Durock.
Yeah, and the other guy.
Was it Orgy?
No, I'm thinking of Jakey Lee. That guy.
Yeah, okay. He did spend a minute in Rough Cut, and he spent a minute in Rat as well.
He did. He did.
Yes.
So,
go ahead.
So, are we going to ever see a series on the grunge movement or the new metal movement or anything like that?
Sorry, Jake.
All right. So,
crossing that off the list.
Yep.
that era's been pretty much well covered, well documented, a lot better than I could do on, we could do on our budget. You've got so many documentaries. You got the behind the musics. You got access with all the new things they have going on, and again, that's why we didn't really want to touch. When we did the LA one, we cut it off at 86 because we didn't really want to, the Poison, Guns N' Roses, Slaughter, Warrant, all that stuff, that's been covered. What more could we say about that? We wanted to kind of get right up into when it really exploded, 80, 82, 83, when the US Festival happened. Then the record labels were signing all the bands, Armor Saint, Malice, Lion, Rough Cut, Rat, Warrior, and Black and Blue, and all these bands were, getting signed, and that was when it really exploded. And then after, it just kind of recycled itself, and people were just doing the cookie cutter thing, and all that's been covered. We didn't want to rehash that, so that's kind of, at least my thoughts. So it was, and again, going back to grunge and doing new metal, I wasn't a real big fan of either of those genres. I mean, I lived through it. I loved, obviously loved Soundgarden when the Loud Love record first came out. I mean, I was aware of them previously, but when that album came out, I listened to that nonstop, as well as Alice in Chains. But it was nothing that I think I would have a real passion to do, and it's not. It's been covered. It's kind of, to me, it's like pointless. What am I going to put out that hasn't been? Metal Evolution. Sam Dunn has done a great series, and he did a big thing on grunge and glam and blah blah blah. And so, I'm babbling. You could just say, "Shut up."
No, so for the record, my very first ever professional radio commercial that I ever produced was Soundgarden when Loud Love came out. And they were playing at the Marquee. And Ton Mastery, my dear friend and everybody's dear friend, did the spot. And the Soundgarden was about as grungy as I would get. I mean, we like Alice in Chains a little bit, so it's okay. But Soundgarden, I think because they had that heavier edge to it, that was more of my appeal.
So I don't remember them doing the Marquee, because I saw them at Jezebel's with Prong and Voivod. And that was Jezebel's, but I saw them at the Whiskey.
They played the Marquee. I still have. It's on my old demo reel, which I still have.
I saw Alice in Chains at the Marquee.
Yeah,
I saw Pearl Jam at a couple clubs. I don't remember. Wow, Soundgarden at the Marquee.
Soundgarden played the Marquee, on Louder Than Love. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I just saw, you mentioned Prong. I just saw Prong a couple years ago, and they're still rocking. They still sound great.
I mean, he was at the Metal Award show, and he's still out there doing it, man. Prong.
So what is it? So what is it about the early years of a musical movement, we'll call it, I guess, that inspires you to want to do these types of videos?
It's what it's just like RJ was saying. It's what we grew up on, man. I mean, I grew up in Orange County. I was fortunate in the early 80s. I saw the very first Metallica show ever that they played at Radio City when they were, doing covers. And just for a handful of people, I saw, the very first Slayer shows when they were doing covers. And all those bands, Wasp and Malice and all those bands at the Woodstock, we'd go to the Country Club, we'd go to the Troubadour, see all these bands. Armor Saint, I saw there. Yeah. I saw them before Joey Vera even joined the band, one of their very earliest shows. I used to live at the Woodstock in Radio City at a concert factory. So, and all those great bands, even some of the national bands that would come through. It was always something that I loved. So I take it as from a fan point of view. I'm not a critic. I don't even consider myself like a journalist. I'm a metal fan. I hope my passion comes through, and that's the biggest compliment I get is people say, "Man, your films are just so passionate. It really digs deep." And for the underground metal fan, and for the people that just didn't know. I mean, people that thought they knew about the scene, they go, "God, I never knew that." Joey Vera and Tommy Lee were in a band together, or I never knew that. These stories about Randy Rhoads, from Kelly Garney, and about the early Quiet Riot. People always will say, come up with stuff. Man, I thought I knew everything about the scene, but after watching your documentaries, I learned something new. So that's a big compliment.
If you're not learning, you're dying. Go ahead.
Yeah. So, what are your thoughts on today's music? If you're paying attention to it,
is there anything you like?
There's some good bands. Going back to we were dealing a lot obviously with the Bay Area Godfathers. A lot of the thrash bands. I live up in San Jose. I saw a recent show. I got not too recent, but Power Trip did a show at the Ritz, and they just kind of remind me. Speaking of the old school thrash, not just musically. You got a lot of those bands doing that style. From Havoc and Warbringer and all these bands, but. I thought Power Trip just had the attitude, the live presence, and the songs, and a lot of great bands. Night Demon that brings back that old new wave of British heavy metal sound, which I love. So there's a lot of great bands. I mean, not necessarily doing anything groundbreaking or original, but they're bringing back kind of that great '80s metal sound that we all grew up on, and then of course a lot of the bands kind of doing that Sunset Strip sound. A lot of them from overseas, like Sweden. And
bands like Dirty Honey and bands like Greta Van Fleet, who are like adopting that whole 70s things, which come back around. And now look at them. They're huge. We actually did a review on Greta Van Fleet, 3 years ago now, at least. When they had a little 6-song EP. Next thing you know, the video just blew up. Blew up. Saw them at the Viper Room, right? Yeah. Never see them at the Viper Room again. They're on their way.
Is the Viper Room closed down now, or just is there days left? Okay.
Yeah, so they're still open. They're still open, but this is going back.
Say they have at least for like another year before they start the construction out there.
Yeah, well, that's a whole other story.
That's a whole other story with the LA clubs going. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a shame. It's a shame. But we got videos like yours that will obviously, it's now in history.
That will keep it alive.
Want to find out what it looked like? Watch the videos.
Well, that's really my main goal. I think it's not an entertainment piece. It's obviously very entertaining, but it's more of a historical piece, and just information about the history of the LA rock and roll scene, and that I'm glad we documented that because that hasn't been something because the VH1s, the behind the musics, and all those kind of documentaries, they're more for entertainment value. They're going to tell, it's the drama of, this and what happened. Oh, and this happened. Oh, and this happened. And the band fell from grace, and then they got back up again. And we just wanted to tell the history of, the Starwood, which nobody, talks about anymore. A lot of the old LA clubs, and when we got into the Bay Area stuff, Wolf Gangs and so many different clubs that were the Stones, the Omni, all these different places that, are no longer, just like in LA, all the clubs are disappearing. Same way up here. And we, wanted to really give that history, especially to the young kids today that will never get that. And I'm sorry to say, that vibe will never, ever be the same, especially when it comes to live music now with everything, at your fingertips with YouTube and whatnot. The live club scene will never ever be like it used to be. So, yeah, it's got to be documented, and I had the opportunity to do it, so I did the best I could to make it as legit as possible.
See a need, fill a need, and you did it successfully.
So we're talking about Bay Area, Godfathers of Thrash. So you got that going on. You got a podcast, is that correct?
Yeah, doing the Shockwave Skull Sessions. I brought that back thanks to my good friend Matt Hartnett, who was the producer, and he was, I used to do it back with Roadrunner Records on their website, and Monty Connor and he's still a regular along with Martin Popoff and all that, but it was once I got involved in the documentaries at about 2012, which was around, or 2011, 2012, which was around the same time Roadrunner changed and Warner Brothers bought them out, and they changed their whole website. So I stopped the podcast then, and I figured now that I've got some time on my hands, and Matt Hartnett was really the one that encouraged me because he was a huge fan of the original Shockwave Skull. Said, dude, bring it back. I'll help you with it. I'll produce the show with you. I got a studio we could work out of, and I said, yeah, if you're up for doing it, because I hate the technical stuff and setting all that stuff and doing all that. And he offered to do it. So, yeah, we got it back up and going, shockwaveschoolsessions.com. And you could get it on Spreaker and iTunes and iHeartRadio and Spotify and all the normal podcast locations.
Well, you're definitely keeping yourself busy, which is good. Look, we greatly appreciate your time doing this with us. You to no end, really, we're so grateful. So it's Inside Metal, Pioneers of LA Hard Rock, Parts 1, LA Hard Rock and Metal, Parts 1 and 2. The LA Metal Scene Explodes, Parts 1 and 2. The Rise of LA Thrash, Parts 1 and 2. See the theme here?
Yeah. And now, Bay Area, Godfathers of Thrash.
Will be part 1 and 2. And we should have part 1 coming out hopefully April, May, and then part 2 will probably come out in the summer, a couple months, 2 or 3 months after that. And we are doing some big screenings. We're planning one now here in the Bay Area that we will screen. We want to screen both part 1 and part 2 for all the artists involved and stuff. So we're working on getting that together. We'll probably do a couple more screenings in LA, maybe Vegas,
Dallas.
And yeah, I don't know, man. I got a lot of friends in Dallas. Well, John Stranansky, my producer, lives in Dallas.
So where can people get updates on release dates and just about the series in general? Do you have a website, Facebook? Where can people go to get info?
Gratuitous plug time, Bob. Gratuitous plug time.
Yeah, the company that does the Inside Metal film, Metal Rock Films, haven't really updated the website there. Best thing is through social media. You can hit me up on social media, Bob Nalbandian. I believe it's Bob Nalbandian Los Angeles, because there's another Bob Nalbandian on Facebook.
Imposter.
Yeah, imposter.
We'll look it up and we'll put it in the description below.
And Inside Metal also has a Facebook page and a Twitter page. So
awesome.
Check out Inside Metal. Yeah.
Awesome.
Cool.
Well, Bob, we greatly thank you for joining us. It's been a pleasure. It's been a pleasure. Just, keep the faith.
Keep waving the flag.
Absolutely.
I will try.
Absolutely.
Us old fuckers got to keep it going somehow.
Right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, as we usually do, I'm RJ Stone.
I'm AJ Motts.
Stay metal.
Sacrifice nothing.
This is Sweet Death Entertainment.